Creek, we didn't really identify any fatal flaws with that. There's no cleanup sites. There's room to put some water there. But as I mentioned before, when we get into the more detailed, why we found that there's some distance to pump and more distance for pipelines. So you want to go to the next slide? So on the recharge evaluations, we just looked at available information, geology and soils. There's a soil agricultural groundwater banking index that UC Davis put out. It's almost 10 years ago now. So we looked at areas where the surface was conductive to recharge. We looked at this AEM data, or the airborne electrical magnetic. Did I get that right, Christine? I'm not a geophysicist. I'm an agricultural engineer. So, and then we haven't looked at well logs because that's more detailed. So, I mean, I probably should have, at the beginning, once there's kind of, particularly when we're looking at direct recharge, once we've got areas identified, why then we want to take this area assessment and focus to that area itself. And that's when we would start looking at well logs. So we didn't look at well logs for this. And then, we'd like the shortest distance to water source so we can get kind of the lowest hanging fruit, the least expensive project. And then we're looking at crops because we want crops that people aren't willing to put extra water on sometimes, or willing to take the surface water. So if you're going to go to the next slide. So when we look at the geology and soils, there's a lot of words on this slide. Basically, in the Palermo area, there's some area that's moderately to good, excellent for recharge. So if we pick, we'll have to watch which area we pick, right, and do that site assessment for that. And the Kelly Power Plant is great for that, but as you've noted, there's the competitiveness with groundwater and there's the high water level. And then the Bangor Conveyance Creek also has got some areas that we can pick for moderately good to excellent for the recharge, but it's also pretty distant. It's a long way to get water there. So let's go to the next slide. So in terms of distance to water, we've got the Palermo Canal in there. We may have to increase capacity in some of those reaches because it's at the end. For the Kelly Power Plant bypass, some of the land is right at the river, so it's close, but we'd like to serve some distance, so there's some variance there. And then the Bangor Creek, some of that land is pretty far from where we would have water, so we'd have to pump and put water in pipelines for a while. So you want to go to the next slide? If I'm going too fast, let me know. But and then looking at cropping, there's a lot of area near the Feather River that has the right kind of crops for this. I mean, when I say I wish I'd have found a better name for it. I called it Category 1 crops, but that's crops that I think are easier to do recharge on because they're pasture, annual crops, they're open, versus tree crops like almonds or walnuts where people get concerned about having water on them too long in the winter and stuff, and those crops are in the Category 2 crops for this table. So there's 1,000 acres in the Palermo area, for example, and nearly 7,000 acres within 2 miles of the Feather River in that area. So in all these places, we're okay on the cropping. So you want to go to the next slide? So this is just kind of a summary of everything. So we got 1,000 acres of the crops that are easier for recharge. We've got 40 feet of available storage. The cleanup is is not too close to where we would be doing recharge. We're pretty close to surface water for Palermo. One thing to note there is we do have local drillers experience. We talked to a local driller in the public meeting we had in November about variable geology that sometimes restricts the lateral and vertical movement of groundwater flow. So you could basically have a finger of blue rock that where you recharge, the water doesn't spread out as quickly as you would think it might because of that. So that's something to to consider. It doesn't mean we don't do recharge there. It's still a good spot to do recharge. And then the power plant, I mean, the Feather River area's got plenty of land, but we've got this, not a lot of room to store water. And then the Bangor conveyance to Wilson Creek, again, we're expecting pumps and long pipelines. We've got places to store water. So if we go to the next slide, when we think of all this together, I haven't done the other benefits yet. I'm getting eager to get to the end. But so the other benefits, just real quickly, we've got shorebird creation ends up not really available in the Palermo area, though, you know, for short time periods, if we have stormwater detention, some of that might work. Then disadvantaged communities, there's some in all of those areas. The GDEs, we've got GDEs nearby in all of those areas, so there'll be some benefits there in any of them. And then where the dry wells are mostly in the Palermo area. So if we go to the next slide. And we did a very, very simple scoring looking at which area was the best versus the worst in different areas. And to just kind of, we didn't see any fatal flaws. There's not a lot of difference, but we end up with the Palermo area recharge as having the best, mostly because there's room to put water there. So, and it's a good place in the subbasin to put water because it's kind of higher up and that water's got room to kind of roll down into the subbasin. So we really like the location of that. The Feather River isn't far behind, though I don't think you can put as much water in the Feather River area. And then Bangor Creek is mostly because of we didn't calculate cost, but just based on the fact that of the longer pipelines and pumping, why that ends up with a lower score. So if we go to I think this is the punchline slide. So we came down to Palermo area recharge project as a strong multi-benefit project that we think is the place where we should move forward to do design, to put that money towards the 60% design and cost estimates. So we think it's a lower cost due to the gravity flow. We've got existing conveyance there where we can extend it a little bit and where necessary, perhaps expand some of the conveyance capacity. It's got cropped lands there. There's also downstream. It looks like we could put some water into like Wyandotte Creek, and there's some owners downstream that are interested in taking water out to use surface water instead of groundwater. And then there's available storage in the aquifer and significant benefits to domestic wells and GDEs there. So that we see that we got a big star on that as the project that we're recommending moving forward. And then the other ones I think are still on the list. I wouldn't call any of them fatal flaws. They're things that could happen in the future, but we would leave them on the list for future if needed. The other thing I would say is based on very preliminary calculations of what we could do with the Palermo area project, and based on the water balance that's in the GSP, we think it's likely that that could balance the subbasin in terms of a water balance. But, you know,
I would also like to make a note that at the last Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee meeting, this was the Palermo Area Recharge Project was the one that the WAC was most interested in. That was the one that they all had consensus on, that they thought was their first choice as well.
Yeah. So I think the next slide says questions. So if you've got any other questions.
I guess, to me, that makes the most sense, but Bangor could be, in the future, a bright spot or hub of agricultural activity. There's a few wineries out there, and more would like to establish, and there is problems obtaining water, and there's been lots of different talks about extending water there, so maybe demand later would make it worthwhile. And then the one along the river, I mean, I don't know. Those types of crops take quite a bit of water, and if you're not gonna get it out of the river cheaper than you can pump your well,
It's-
why would you do it? But I could see it could work. I
Right.
mean, I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, what do the farmers want? I mean, if they have a need and a want, if there's a market, do you want to speak on it a little bit?
I have just an observation.
Can you come to the microphone, please, do? We, you know, consultants one thing, we need to know what the public needs and wants too.
Okay, I'm Duke Sherwood, and as I look around the room, there are 3 people here that have ranches in Wyman Ravine. It's a natural flow, and I don't know why we haven't discussed it before, but I'd like to see that investigated for another option. You've got, it's a big drainage, and the reason I thought about it is
And we put
when
the
you brought up the
retention,
flood control,
yeah.
because as you know, Stimson Road, Cox Lane, Daly's, we flood like crazy down there, and it's because the whole Wyman Ravine is overgrown with trees and brush. However, there's rice farmers next to me, and they're all pumping well water, and Wyman goes right through all these ranches. So I would just like to suggest that somebody takes a look at that as an option.
I think it is, Duke. I think
Yeah, so-
the goal is that this will kind of terminate, put that water into Wyman's and make it available through there, I think is.
Yeah, so
discussions I've had
thank
with-
you for bringing that up, because we're
So this
working.
is good news. We're kinda
Yeah,
on
so
the same page.
basically, if you throw the map up there again, why, I didn't get that expressed clearly, so I apologize for that. But if we get the map up here, again, one more. The very beginning, right? So I think we got the Wyman Ravine on the west side there, right, where the yellow connects to that? It's hard to see, right? It's hard, I can't see it either. I think
Yeah, it's there.
Wyman Ravine is on the west there, the blue line that goes north-south.
Yeah.
But the yellow pipe connects to that. So part of our thinking was that we would be able to connect the South Feather Palermo Canal through that pipeline or another method to Wyman Ravine. So we could put water into Wyman Ravine and get to the growers that I mentioned downstream from there. And that there's a couple other spots that we would think to look at that I don't think are very clear on this map, but into Wyandotte Creek itself, there's a couple of the South Feather red lines that are pretty close to that, and we would look at connecting those to Wyandotte Creek, which then eventually goes back to Wyman Ravine too.
So we
So-
can't, I guess, to make it clear, we can't cause harm. So if we're gonna put water over there, we're gonna have to have retention basins along the way. We can't create a problem. We have to solve a problem.
Right.
It's not at 20 feet in there.
So we'd be recharging there too. That's the idea.
Right, and I mean, honestly, one of our concerns is if we put water in the summer into these creeks to get water, if the recharge might be so good that we have to put a lot of water into the creek to get it to growers down.
Oh, there's a lot of clay over there.
Okay.
Isn't there like,
Marban.
You want me to come up there?
Sure.
Tom?
yeah, come on.
So my name is Jace Rash, and I have been in Palermo area since all my hair was dark and I had a lot of it. So I had spent a day with Rylan and one of the other engineers. What was his name? Yeah. And we did some driving around, which included looking at our ranch, the old Kister Ranch, which has the infrastructure to draw water out of Wyman Ravine. It's already there. We just need to be able to put some kind of retention area in. And then we went upstream and evaluated the railroad trestle, which I have a hard time this far away from that map. That yellow pipeline that you have there, is that go down to Railroad Avenue, or does that cut across at Palermo Road? That one there, where it goes west, is that not there, on down the next, that one there?
Road is that along?
Is that Palermo Road or is that? Okay.
I can actually see it right here.
Yeah, so, and the red line that I see there, is that the creek that runs along Railroad Avenue?
So the red line there, that's, yeah, essentially, that's part of South Feather's conveyance system too. They use that creek to convey.
Okay.
that to the-
So in our conversation with Ryland, we looked at the trestle that red line enters into, where it goes under the tracks, and that is huge. The railroad has made that huge. It's more than enough. Also, the ditch that runs there in Ryland's and the other engineers' opinion had enough flow to carry everything. So if the pipeline was dumped into that and then opened up down Wyman Ravine, it would take that water on down. And also, there's another spot, because I've been giving this a lot of thought since we were out there. Railroad Avenue and Alice, I believe it is. No, Lewis, I'm sorry. Railroad Avenue and Lewis is a flooding problem. It was been designated as a flooding problem. So I'm going to admit to something. I used to own the property across the street there at Railroad Avenue, and I had forgotten I had done this. But years ago, we kept flooding, our house kept flooding inside, and I actually put a Y at the Wyman Ravine Creek, or that creek that goes under the trestle, and brought that Y around and gradually sloped it up towards Railroad Avenue. If that water was distributed down to that drainage, it would dump back into that drainage and go under the trestle and could eliminate the problem that you have with flooding at Railroad Avenue and Lewis Avenue.
So we have a whole nother project we're trying to run parallel.
Exactly.
On the drainage, and that's where that could work in.
Right, and your retention idea is a great idea because there's all kinds of places down that things could be cleaned out and widened and it would retain the water and then so on and
Small
so on
dams,
and so on.
You'd have stock, a place for stock to
Yep.
get water. You could have a place to pump out of.
So
Yeah.
Ryland kind of did the math when, and I don't remember what he said, but we have 5 agricultural wells that pump for 6 months straight and they produce 500 to 1,000 gallons a minute. So if you do the math, it's a lot of water that we pump out of the ground to irrigate 300 acres of rice. And if the lines were extended and Wyman Ravine was opened up, which would allow drainage for the flooding problem, and could transport, and according to South Feather Water and Power, they have enough water to supply us with water, so we wouldn't be pumping, and we would be doing 300 acres of redistribution of water at the same time,
Recharge.
recharge.
Win-win.
And there's, and downstream from us, there's the Weinzingers. They have another 300 or 400 acres of rice, and then below them, and that eventually gets into Honcut Creek. So from us, from Jace all the way down, there's farm ground.
You have the Daly Ranch, then you've got the Cummings Ranch, which is across the creek from us on Wyman Ravine. That is rice. I don't know how much of that they're working now, but it's all wells, all wells. So there's probably thousands of acres that could be recharged if the water was there. Or we could reclaim, like right now, Wyman Ravine is running, we got a strip 6 foot wide, 2-3 inches deep, that's running nonstop right now. And since the orchards went in and they started pumping groundwater out to do the orchards on the old Belden Ranch, we have water almost all summer long coming down that. We didn't before.
So basically, orchards are passively recharging. And it gets to the creek.
Passively recharging, I think the taxation on the water table in the ground is worse than their
Okay.
recharges.
So you're getting surface water, but you think down ground. We'll find all that out. That's why we exist. It's a good deal, really. If you think about it, we're ahead of the curve. We're not like San Joaquin, where we've almost destroyed our water and then trying to fix it. We're trying to stay ahead of it. So this is a good thing. I call it taking the devil's money to do good things. Angels work, right? We'll take their money. All right, any other discussion on this? Any more direction from the board? I mean, do you want us to vote on that, making that a priority?
Yes.
I don't,
I move that we, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
It's clearly like the best option. It puts the water right where we need it. I think the Bangor one would be cost prohibitive for the basin in terms of long-term pumping costs and things like that, and annual overhead for the basin in terms of pumping it back up to where we wanted it. This water, the conveyance is there already. It might need to be expanded, and then we can just put that water into Wyman's, let it come down.
I think it's.
And I think, I mean, I know the pipeline's part of the drainage, but there's county drainage and everything. When we looked with Wraith, there's kind of, that wouldn't take much to tie all of that together to where that whole system's essentially there already. It just need to be kind of put together a little bit better. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And then even just from like a holistic perspective, just getting that amount of water into the basin year round, I think in terms of just the whole portfolio of what we are doing, I think that's gotta account for something, especially if most of our GDEs are potentially up and down that stretch as well. If that water's coming through there, I think that's gotta be a benefit as well. And then I move that we approve the Palermo Recharge Project for the 60% design.
Yeah, I live in Palermo, and that all sounds really good to me, and it's way overdue, so I'll second.
And under discussion, as far as in the future, I think we can let economics drive us towards, if there's a need and there's high-end agriculture and a need, we can look at these other projects. But right now, this is low-hanging fruit, so I'm going to support this. Do you have any comments?
No, I just wanted to hear. In my search,
Okay. No fair. She uses an artificial intelligence up here and checks on us all the time.
yeah, but
All those in-
takes a lot to put all the information in and then let it weigh in.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, there we go.
Real quick, I do apologize. Before you adjourn, I forgot to put the update on there.
Okay, let's do an update.
Okay, I'll try and keep it short. So I wanted to update you, at the last board meeting, you gave direction to go ahead and move forward with Hansford Economic Consulting on the, potentially I can call it like a fee memo instead of an actual like study. So that's gonna happen in May. We've already contracted with them. So she'll be presenting to you in May. We'll also be presenting the budget at that time. So as some of you might know, I'm still learning a little bit on all of the acres. I wasn't quite here yet, but when we did our original fee study, there had been some mistakes in that on acreage. That's why we had to do the user classification. So part of that is that they did not provide a methodology that we could, a repeatable methodology to finding that. So we're actually working with Stantec to do our tax roll again. And so they are going to try and provide us a memo so that we can continuously, next time we'll be able to do, we'll have a repeatable method for how we get the classifications. So you'll also be seeing a contract to work with them. But I also wanted to point out that at one point you had signed a short procurement policy, which essentially said that the GSA will follow the county's procurement policy, except for the fact that anything that was over $5,000 would need to be approved by the board. We are considering coming back with a proposal of changing that number from 5,000 to 25,000. That's just based on what Butte County also does, so contracts under $25,000. So that would only be with what's in line with our budget, if there's a budget item for it. So one of them would be the tax roll. So that's why our contract with Stantec will be coming to you even though it's under 25 is because of that rule. If you want to stay with the 5,000, then I won't consider that and we'll just continue to come back. It just means that for every contract, we have to ensure that anything over $5,000 will come back. So sometimes that.
My thought, though, is what's our total, how much money do we collect? I mean,
So our fees generally are it's about 250. I think it's going to be about 270. I'll be presenting the budget next time.
$270,000.
It'll probably go up in the following years because right now Sigma is covering a lot of the monitoring, annual reporting, and those items. So we're lucky that the GSP update and the amendment will be covered by the Sigma grant, but annual reporting won't. So some of those costs, unfortunately, will come back onto the fee payers unless we find another grant.